being taken out and will go into the site plan regulations. So this is the public hearing to hear any objections to moving these particular items. Let's see, off-street parking, while others were then proposed to be moved to the site plan regulations, and that would be in the 173-20.2 and 173-20.3. And so, as I said, this is the public hearing to amend the site plan regulations and to include these additions. Mike, did you want to add some issues to this, or?
No, just one small one, but in general, the numbering has been fixed. The duplication has been fixed. None of these changes are substantive, requiring a restart of the hearing. There is an additional infelicity, which I have just noticed in 17322, paragraph C. There's references to section 175135. I think that should be 175136 in the new numbering system. 136 is the table of parking requirements per use. 175-135 refers to landscaping. So I think, I beg your pardon, if we change the appearances of 175-135 to 175-136, and there are 3 of them in 173-20.2, will be golden.
Okay, we can do that within this hearing.
Yeah, but this can be done right now because it's again not a substantive change. It's just a matter of numbering.
Okay.
175-135 is marking 175-136 as availability of spaces.
Yeah, 175-136 is availability of spaces,
Yeah.
and that's what it should be. Thank you, John.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Tavis, did you want to say anything about this?
No, I just look forward to having the change finally made. Makes it much easier to work with.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, this particular change to the regulations is one that's supported in the master plan. And so this is yet another thing that we've gone ahead and accomplished with the adoption of the master plan. This streets and access, also we have landscaping regulations that have been moved over to the site plan regulations, and some lighting regulations that will be done in the future. So, okay.
Madam Chairwoman, I was making a note that I noticed that the chairwoman, myself, and the previous planner began work on revising the parking regs on November 6, 2019.
Okay.
It's been a long slog to get them to this point.
Right. Very good. Okay. Any? No comments? All right. Then.
Is there anything on
No, I don't think so. Okay. So I would open the public hearing on this amendment. Okay, and I don't see anyone wanting to speak to this. So I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and would accept a motion.
So moved to accept and move these regulations into site plan review as presented tonight with the 3 minor changes,
Okay, thank you.
2 minor changes.
Okay, someone want to second that?
Seconded.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, very good. Okay. Let's see, the next item on the agenda is the committee reports. Stormwater regulations. We're actually working with the Wolfeboro Waters Committee, and Conservation Commission has already, Tavis has sent those to both of those bodies, and so both of them are considering them. Let's see, anything on the drive-through restaurants? Okay.
I can just report that, beg pardon, the notices for the inserts on June 11 and July 2 into the Granite State News have been discussed with Tavis, and the upcoming June 14 deadline for me to contact the Granite State News regarding publicity is in my calendar, and we're on track.
All right, very good. Thank you. Okay.
Can I make a comment on that?
Sure, yes.
Seems that there's a lot of hysteria out there in the public that think a particular franchise or something is coming through. And I would just maybe like to point out that the committee is working on a broad-based overview, not for any specific candidate, and to my knowledge, we are not preparing for any special franchise with this. I want to calm people down to think that it's not what's going on out there, people. So just come, see it for yourself, participate, and be fair and open-minded, and listen to all sides.
Okay, thank you, John.
Seconded.
Okay, Filter Bed Road, Mike?
The Filter Bed Road Committee has met. They met on May the 13th. All members were present. Beg pardon while I get my notes together. The committee looked at the possibilities that had been presented to it, doing nothing, acknowledging that there's a need for change, and moving Pine Hill Road Development District south to incorporate the area between Varney, Filter Bed Road, and the current boundary of Bay Street Limited Business District. Third option was to bring Bay Street Limited Business District west to cover the properties abutting Filter Bed Road, north to the boundary of the Taylor home, incorporating the Kimball property just a little bit above that. We discussed all of those options. The committee voted unanimously to recommend to the planning board that the solution to the problem is to move the Bay Street Limited Business District west to cover the current properties that are in residential on the east side of Filter Bed Road, and properties abutting Filter Bed Road on the west side of the of that line, with the exclusion of the condo property, which is tax lot number 7, and reaching up to include the Kimball property on the northwest corner. So the final boundary would be the northern boundary of the Taylor home, across the street, the northern boundary of the Kimball property, and then running down to Varney Street on both sides of Filter Bed Road, with the exception of the condo property near the corner of Varney and Filter Bed Road. Bring it into Bay Street Limited Business District. There are business uses, commercial uses allowed in that district that are less intensive than the ones that are listed in the Pine Hill Road Development District. Stakeholders were happier with that solution. Both private individuals who had been invited onto that subcommittee were happy with that solution. And the question of Filter Bed Road itself, what portion is town maintained and by prescription town owned? What portion is still in existence as an untraced easement running across the land to 109A is an issue that needs to be addressed, but we felt that, one, it was not part of the remit of the subcommittee, and two, in the absence of any proper deed search and any proper tracing of the easement, and more importantly, the solution of whether that easement gives the right to pass across it to the public, including the town, needs to be dealt with by legal counsel and proper deed search organization, and it was not within our purview. With that conclusion reached, the subcommittee self-dissolved and would like the planning board's recognition of the fact that the subcommittee no longer exists and has been dissolved and will go back into the pond.
Okay, and so now it's up to the planning board to deal with this issue.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this, I guess, should become an item on a future agenda, on a work program.
Right.
To how to exactly go about, well, first of all, discussing the recommendations of the subcommittee. The board is not obliged to accept them. These are recommendations of a board subcommittee. The board can say, the heck with it, we don't like it. But if the board wants to go further, it has to discuss that first, and then look at the solution and decide whether or not that's a good one, and then how to put it into practice.
Right, and have public hearings.
Public hearing, write an ordinance, hold a public hearing, let the public tell us what they think of the idea. They may think it's a terrible idea, and we have to go back to the drawing board, or they may think it's just fine, and we go further from there. The usual procedure for getting something on the ballot that affects people's property rights.
Okay, very good, Mike, thank you. Anybody have any questions for Mike? Okay, let's see, lighting. Any report?
No,
Yeah.
we're not reporting tonight.
Yeah, okay, all right. Let's see, short-term rental.
I can speak to that.
Yep,
So the short-term rental committee has met 4 or 5 times at this point. We've been doing a lot of information gathering still. My synopsis is that based on the feedback that we have gotten, I would say what we have heard is 50% positive towards people's owners' experiences as short-term renters, and 50% negative, both owners and abutters. But we all know that if you're a complainer and you're a person that's having the problem, you're the one that's going to show up. Not all the positive people who feel good about short-term rentals are going to show up. So my take is that the majority of the short-term rentals experiences going on in Wolfeboro are happening without an issue. However, we have some serious pain occurring in some specific neighborhoods, Port Wedland and Wittenneck Road, both of which have homeowners associations associated with them. You have a couple of letters that we have printed out specifically from the president or members of these homeowners associations who are extremely upset, as well as other people who have presented to us about absentee owners renting out their homes, large groups of people coming in and wreaking havoc on the neighborhood, basically, to net it out. So they are asking us to help solve the problem. The Homeowners Association has not had enough teeth, even when they hire attorneys, to help them solve the problem. So that's where we are. Knowing that state legislature still looks to, we don't know when the state is going to come forward with their recommendation. They will at some point, but we don't have that yet. So at this point, I would love the planning board's feedback on this situation. I feel that we have a choice. We could look at it as, and we have an attorney looking at certain specifics of the scenarios that we are analyzing, but we could perhaps look at it in phases: short-term, medium-term, long-term. Long-term being the state legislature and what they come up with. Short-term, my feeling, and I think the plan and the committee agrees, that we need to do something to help these communities who are suffering. So short-term could perhaps be ramping up the local police power to fine violators, homeowners who are violating and causing issue within their communities. But we are looking for your feedback at this point, because we really, we are going round and around and around with this issue. So we would love your thoughts. That's where we're at.
I would assume.
I hope that nets it out. Okay. Yeah.
I would assume that people are looking into this idea of whether this absentee owner renting out to people on a regular basis is a business, and whether that is allowed, because to me that says that they're in a different world. And the other issue is that for many years, my mother-in-law would be proud to have her New Hampshire meals and bedding, or what was it? Rental certificate up on the wall because they rented their house for a 2-week period. And that, to me, is an issue which needs to be investigated if these people are not paying that kind of thing. Now, I believe that VRBO and some of those immediately have that as part of what they have to have as part of their rental agreement, that goes to the state or goes
It
to
does. It does.
And so therefore, that's, the issue. But if people are renting without telling VRBO that this is something they need to do, then that's another issue.
I personally do not think the taxes are the big problem we're facing here. I think the big problem we're facing here is the complaints and the pain that is being caused within these neighborhoods. If you read these letters, they speak for themselves as far as what is happening.
I've read them, and that's an issue. And if you go back historically, the people in the little community where I happen to be summered, and now spend all my summers there, away from my winter house, those renters were people that you knew, people that came back year after year, and so they had the idea that they didn't want to offend people.
That's not the case anymore, unfortunately.
Right, and so that's the issue.
Yep. Any other feedback?
Okay, John,
Brad?
did you want to? Yeah.
Go ahead, John, I'll go after you.
I think Peter's right. the older generation can be proud of inviting their guests and friends over so they could stay at the cottage that was most likely on the property that they lived on. And, you know, one of the things that is more favorable is owner-occupied areas, and even owner-occupied areas get the neighbors up in frenzy a little bit because they don't know what's going to happen when an ADU is built next to them. So the other part of these stories are that the person who rents a place, not always, but most generally, doesn't care about the neighbor next door. They might have something that they like to do, and they're paying the rent, and they think it gives them the empowerment to do whatever they want to do in certain cases. And when you're a neighbor and you live next to one of those places, you can pretty much guarantee you wish that it was a household of family that was living there. Because every Friday, you can guarantee there'll be a party. And if you think that living next to a party every Friday night is fun, then talk to some of those people that have to live next to them, and they'll tell you different. But there are some nice people. We heard some people that said that they rent their houses and they do it because they're not there and they have expensive houses and it helps pay the taxes. Unfortunately, the person next to them is an older couple that pays an exorbitant amount of taxes, and they want privacy on their lake house too. So we have to find the balance here, and we're working on a few different things right now. I think we're all open to how we're going to regulate.
Right. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, just add a little bit here. So I've been new to this committee here, been to a couple of meetings, and, what Susan and John have said are right on there. I agree with Susan. I don't believe, the taxes and the people, that part of it is an issue really at all. I think that the vast majority of them are abiding by all the rules and everything is fine there. And as Susan pointed out, it's the few that are dissatisfied are the ones you hear the most vocal complaints from. And you don't get that many people coming out that are in favor of these, of this issue here. My thought on this is, and I kind of want to get in the discussion if we get, hopefully it'd be nice to have some more time at these committee meetings, because we seem to spend a lot of the time on the public input part of it. We don't get a lot of time to actually sit down and discuss it as a committee. I know we can't do it as like an ADU where you have the owner occupied there, but if there'd be a way to, talk about if there's, to have a management group in town or within a certain response, so that these people that, buy these houses and rent them out and live in New York or California, wherever they're from, that if an issue comes up, there is a party responsible taking care of that property management team that can respond to the issue and deal with it without necessarily really get the police involved every time, stuff like that. If there's an overcrowding issue, so all of a sudden there's 13 to 15 cars there, and they're having late night parties on making a lot of noise in the neighborhood, then it can be addressed very quickly that way. So that was kind of something I wanted to bring up at the committee level and talk about that some more, see if that's a viable idea or not, and kind of explore it. So it's kind of where I'm at with it. But
Do you think a property manager, and that would be great if that could work, Brad? I don't want to necessarily ask the police to get more involved here. Could a property manager have the teeth to come down on these people and, arrive at the property and time after time after time, or would the property manager be dealing with the owner? How would the property manager handle an ongoing problem at the same property?
Yeah, that's something that also has to be worked out, but I would think you'd have to have the property manager have the authority from the owner to act on their behalf. Whether it's to...
But it's really the owner's fault for, over time, for allowing these same types of groups
Right.
to rent their property.
Yeah.
The weddings, the Memorial Day partiers who don't care about Wolfeboro, you know, it's the owner's fault.
I think Brad makes a good point, though. If a manager has a connection with the owner, then you've got continuity. You see what I'm saying? So if you're in the owner's good graces, possibly the management that's going to be supported by the selectmen's end anyway. Okay, so then basically they're part of the arm of the enforcement, but it would probably be more of a call from a manager first rather than a police call. If it got bad, then that's probably when you would call the police. So you get a middleman in there that works with the homeowner, and then you can kind of start small, and maybe you can address the issue by a phone call. And then if it gets worse, the homeowner may know that there'll be a fine or some other steeper consequence, but like Brad says, you know, we haven't got there yet, but I think he's talking the right system.
So, go ahead, Julie.
I'm still feeling also that mom and pop that just, rented out the room, that's kind of a small type family deal, and you're inviting your family in to stay. But some of these things sound like, yes, a corporation has come in and bought a building, and now they've turned it into a rental unit. So it's not really just a lake house that we're renting out an extra room anymore. It's become a business that they're pushed into a residential section.
Both are happening.
Yeah, so it's kind of a code thing is what it's kind of sounds to me. And then the other thing that I see also is like, there's, like you have it here in one of them, like, you rented, someone rented to 2 families, but 16 people showed up at a 3-bedroom home. Well, that's a life safety issue at that point. The fire department can just shut them down. Yeah, I know.
That has not been the case, though.
Yeah.
So
Because if you
that's where
tried to
we're
get
at.
your home, with your occupancy, you have to say we have 4 bedrooms and this many people. Or, geez, you're a single mom and you have 2 kids. You have to have this bedroom and this bedroom and this. But if you're from out of town and you rented from that guy over there, you can just show up with how many people you want. They don't care. Is kind of like what it sounds like.
Well, there's a lot of regulation that all the towns around us are putting into place. I have details of what the neighboring towns have done. It runs the gamut, but there's regulation associated with all of them. From Jackson, that is the most liberal example, they have short-term rentals permitted by conditional use permit, all the way up to North Conway, that has forbidden them altogether. Forbidden them, and everything in between. But there's regulation across the board associated with all of that, and administrative costs and overhead and staff, and I'm just not sure we have all of that. Maybe we do. It would be great if we could solve the problem in an easier way. That's my opinion. Mike, do you have anything to?
Yeah, I've just been sitting here listening to all the comments and then reflecting on the 2 letters that Susan sent to us, and then what I know about short-term rentals and how they're being handled around the state. There is no help from the state legislature currently. They've passed the buck. They really don't want to deal with it because it's a thorny issue. They may deal with it in the upcoming session, or at least put some legislation out. Whatever they put out will trump whatever we do. So I wouldn't recommend that we rush into anything, because we might find that it doesn't work because the state says you can't. So that's my first thought. My second thought was property managers, nice idea, no teeth. If you read the letters here and listen to what Susan had to say, it seems like most of these STRs are quiet, well-managed, and you wouldn't even know that they were there, except you notice different cars with license plates week after week in the driveway. There are a couple that are a problem, and we know where they are. And if you read the descriptions, one guy from Texas, he's got 12 bunkies on one floor on a four-bedroom house with a septic system which is not capable of handling it. He cares so much that when someone complains, he sells the joint and moves on. So you have a no-teeth property management organization knocking on his door or sending him a letter saying, we don't like what you're doing, it's against our rules. What do you think he's going to say? You have the other guy who refuses to register for state meals and rentals tax. If he will not abide by a state regulation, which brings along a visit by a statey, what's he going to do to a Wolfeboro regulation which has no teeth? I'm reminded that the house I live in is pretty old. In the 1880s and 90s, it was turned into a rooming house, and you can still see the areas in the house where the rooms used to be. Everybody made a living at that time doing that, and they did that, and they still do that, and it's clearly a commercial use in a residential zone, and it's not a right thing to do, but it's something that people have done. I don't think the town should blanketly, as Conway has done, declare them all commercial uses and therefore illegal and send out cease and desist orders too. That's a bit extreme. I think that my recommendation would be long-term, wait for the state, 2 points, wait for the state to bite the bullet, number one, and they're going to have to because this is a statewide issue. And number two, let's see how the Conway experience plays out. They have blanketly forbidden all STRs and have sent out over 500 cease and desist orders to all of the ones that they know. They're going to be sued. They know they're going to be sued. They've done it deliberately so that they would be sued, so they could see how it's going to work out. Let's, long-term, let them pay the legal fees, let them spill the blood on the floor. Let's see what the courts decide with a blanket prohibition. Short-term, I think the selectmen should meet with the police commissioners and say we have a few fairly well-known scofflaws in town who are making it difficult for their neighbors. Let's enforce the regulations that we currently have in a serious fashion. Don't mess around. And use the tools that we have now. We have health and safety. We have noise regulations. No party noise after 10 o'clock that's really loud. Our noise regulation is beautifully written. It says obnoxious and unnecessary noise. That's a matter of judgment. It can be anything. So the police have wide enforcement authority there. If they have the political backing of the selectmen and backing from their own commissioners, they'll feel emboldened to enforce the regulations, and that'll have a salutary effect because clearly we only have a few that are really bad. And they're the ones that we need to go after. Rather than do a one-size-fits-all, solve a problem that doesn't exist. Let's go after the ones who are making a problem. And that's my point. Thank you.
Mike, I agree with much of what you say. One point that I would make is that the people in the 1900s or 1800s with rooming houses, they were in residence when their guests were there. which is not true with many of these absentee owners.
Agreed.
So, it is a different thing. In other words, if you're in
It's very
a rooming
different, yeah.
house and people are being a pain, then the owner says, get out.
Agreed. Agreed. Police show up at the house, a party house, and is roaring with noise and drink and people acting badly, disorderly conduct. There must be measures that the police can take in that regard. The owners of these houses are known, they're on our tax rolls. They can be fined.
That's, I think, what would solve the problem, right there.
Finding?
Going after the owner, because it's the same properties. These renters come and go. Renters, they can get lectured and have to shut the party down, then they're gone. Then the new group shows up. So the police are going to be back there again the next weekend. Same thing.
Yeah,
It's
you
the
can go
owner.
online and just, sign up, just like my kids have been doing that.
I can't hear a thing, Julie.
So my kids have been staying places like that. You just go online, you pick a place, you pay online, you never see the owner.
Right.
The owner might be, 2, 3 houses down maybe. They give them the lock code, they go in for the weekend and then leave. It's like,
And a lot
nobody
of
knows
that
anybody.
happens without a problem. Okay, I rent a place up in Bethlehem. I am not there when the renters check in. I vet them properly. We have security cameras. I talk to them. I make sure that I am comfortable with who is coming. That is not the case with these property owners. So I guess my question is it possible for our police force to have more teeth to fine the owners based on complaint number 1? I'm just throwing it out there. $1,000 fine. Complaint number 2, $3,000 fine. Complaint number 3, you get slapped with a $5,000 fine. We don't have time for people like this in Wolfeboro. They are giving this town a bad name. And these poor people, I feel so bad for them having to look forward to another summer of this.
Another thing that came up in the discussion there yesterday was quickly talked about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we talked a little bit about bylaws in some of these associations, like, the 2 that we have letters from here. And if I recall, I think one of the representatives from the association made a comment they couldn't change the bylaws, but I got thinking about that, and I believe an association can have their public hearings and stuff, and they can adopt and change bylaws at their public meetings and stuff like that. So either one of these associations here that we have the letters from could, if they wanted to, I think, or at least have the discussion, that they could go into their bylaws and, forbid, rentals of the properties, and if they get the votes within that association, that could take care of maybe 2 of these problems that were most vocal yesterday with us. There's just another thought anyway that,
So you're saying that the bylaws of the HOA could be changed to do what?
they could, if they wanted to, they could ban short-term rentals within their association.
Yep.
But you have to have the majority of the property owners agree to
Oh,
that.
definitely, it would have to be,
So
yeah.
that- And I think that's where part of the problem
Yeah,
is
they
with
might not
Fort
have that.
Wayland.
That's
Yeah.
right,
And it
because
may
we had
take a
other
year or
people in
two.
the same neighborhood who were renting out quite successfully. The guy moved in, he bought the problem property, he installed security cameras. It's no longer a problem. He's on top of it, and it's no longer a problem. It's the other guy who doesn't care, who's repeated problem.
I think that if it were a simple matter of just amending your HOA to say, no, you can't do this anymore, these 2 letters here would not have been written. And even if they were amended to say, you can't do this anymore, how are they going to enforce that?
Right, yeah.
I mean, all they can do, the only thing they can do is to take them to court for breach of a covenant, which is not a really big deal. And it would take an awful strong judge to say, okay, you're in breach, therefore you cannot do it anymore, you are enjoined. I really think, Brad, that it's time for the selectmen to stand up and take a position on the issue of enforcing current regulations that are on the books now on the problem STRs, where the cops have a record, those regulations, noise, health and safety, litter, whatever, overcrowding. Look at the certificate of occupancy, how many people are allowed in the house. If there's 10 more than are allowed in the house, that place is a bad place. The police can enforce that as well as Steve can, but it needs political will behind it, and I don't think saying that the HOA should be taking the action is really going to cut it.
Okay, go ahead, John.
Well, I think you are hitting on an issue that the selectmen may have to come to grips with, and that's some sort of enforcement. I think when you try to enforce something that's called something, it gets a little dicey, and that's where I had a small talk with Susan. You know, what it looks like is a town-wide, just a straight enforcement rather than scrutinizing on one particular party house that has the party house, because
Well, it's enforcement by complaint,
it is enforcement by complaint.
which some people don't like, but that's what it is. It's enforcement by complaint.
And that way you're not, because what we heard from the police is they don't question whether or not somebody's in a short-term rental. It's not their line.
Right, shouldn't be.
They're just
It
going
shouldn't
to
be.
a complaint, a general complaint.
Yeah.
So we have to treat all of this somewhat in a general fashion, is the way, and we don't want to be prejudicing one specific group and say, we're looking at these guys. Those guys aren't going to say, well, what about those guys that have a wedding party and they're crazy down the road? So
I think in the final analysis, it is not within the purview of this planning board to solve the STR problem. I think if you look at the example of Conway tried it through the planning board, put a ballot initiative on the ballot. Town said, no, we don't want any STRs, but it became an issue for the selectmen to solve. And the selectmen are the ones who sent out the cease and desist orders, because only the selectmen have enforcement powers. We, as a planning board, don't have enforcement powers. We can instruct our code officer to go out and shut down all commercial uses in residential zones, I suppose, but I think that would be a bit of an overstep. I think when the short-term rental subcommittee has finished its work and produces its report, if the planning board adopts it, that should be passed on to the selectmen for resolution. I think the problem that exists, such as it is today with short-term rentals, is one that requires executive action. It's not something that the planning board can solve. We can only make recommendations on this score.
So the recommendations that we're trying to work on right now is we're trying to create a use and see what the use of this is currently. So if we want, the committee, we made a motion to regulate, not to eliminate. And how we regulate is where we are right now. So we technically are in the favor of allowing them, okay? But the use is a planning board item, and the enforcement is a selectman's item.
You feel comfortable walking through a minefield then? I mean, to decide to regulate STRs at this political point in the history of STRs in this state is a very bold move. I mean, you have a pending Superior Court case which will go to the Supremes pretty quickly because it's got statewide implication. They're going to come down with some decision. You've got the state legislature, which knows there's a problem statewide, and you have individual towns which have come up with their solutions. all of which are vulnerable to suit. Remember that some of these STRs are organized into 1,000-strong membership unions with lots of cash to pay lots of lawyers. Wolfeboro, with our small legal budget on the planning board, is going to regulate STRs, jumping in with both feet. I think is very bold. Leave it at that, just very bold.
Well, I can only say one thing. If I waited for my big brother to do everything for me in my life, I wouldn't be here today.
Thank you, John.
Okay. So,
Yes?
I'm glad I'm not on this committee.
I think that, I hope Mike is right, that the state will eventually come forward with legislation, and when they do, I have a question. So if we regulate and we come up with our own regulatory rules, and then the state comes out with something, are we free to continue on with our own rules, or will the state then trump, as you said before, what we have come up with?
Only where there's conflict.
Okay.
So if you say only within double setbacks and half the height requirement and maximum occupancy of 7, and the state says anywhere they want to go, you're done. You lose, your regulation is invalid all
So
of a
if they have a
sudden.
difference of opinion,
Well, if they, whatever they regulate, if it conflicts with what town is regulated,
it trumps you.
correct.
Got it.
Okay, so do you think we should be looking at a short term and then, as Mike says, sort of hold off on the long term?
Yes, that
Because
is my
if we-
recommendation. That is my vote.
Oh, okay. All right.
Short term
because-
being, give the police force more teeth to fine the problem property owners,
Okay,
period.
And remember, the selectmen can rewrite some of the ordinances they currently have, and they can even write new ones if they want to. They have that authority to do it whenever they want. They can define all kinds of, they can define noise. They can define the number of people who can be present at a particular party. They can do all kinds of stuff. Their ordinances may be contested, but in the meantime, the local police have to enforce them.
okay, well, just to get back to Brad's point where he said that we took up most of the meeting with public comments, which we did.
Yes.
And I mean, I think we've heard enough from the public at this point in time that at the next meeting, I think it would be good if we could just sort of stay, you've got 15 minutes, so say it all in the 15 minutes, and then we're going to go into our committee. Because we really have to, I think, get to a point where the committee is really discussing this. And
Yes.
see if they agree with the point of that you've just brought up. And
Brad,
then-
are you in agreement that that is a possible solution, what I just said?
Oh, yeah, I think anything's a possible solution here, I think, like Kathy said, and it's mentioned earlier, I think we really need to sit down as the committee there and really get into a good, long conversation and talk about all these things that we've actually brought up here tonight and kind of determine which avenue we want to, pursue to present to the planning board for their recommendation. So,
That's what we're
I
trying
don't
to
think
do.
we're there
yeah.
yet as a committee. I think we've thrown out a lot of good ideas, a lot of different ideas. We just need to really kind of come together on which avenue we want to go with and proceed with that. So,
I agree.
yeah.
I guess I'm just asking for your opinion, if you feel that giving the police force more power to fine the problem property owners would be a possible solution in the short term, and wait for the state legislature to be the long-term solution.
I think it would be possible. I think I'd want to probably meet with the commission too and stuff, to get their input on it, because that adds more workload onto the PD, which is, well, obviously the summertime is their busy season, being out there with everything that's
But it
going on.
could
So,
perhaps stop the problem from repeating itself, right?
Yeah.
Find the property owner, guess what? The problem stops, as opposed to them having to keep going to the same house weekend after weekend with a new group that's causing trouble.
Yep, no, it's definitely worth discussing more and stuff, I believe, yeah. So it's definitely viable.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead, Tavis.
I was just going to say, I don't believe there's an existing policy right now that would allow a police infraction, literally a crime, to be assigned. I mean, if Mike and Kathy were having a party and the police show up, Mike and Kathy have to be cited for being loud or unruly or what have you, not the property owner. The officer doesn't have that choice. I don't think there's an existing policy in Wolfeboro right now that would allow multiple infractions of tenants to then be punishable by the property owner. So, but it's probably plausible to put, or have the selectmen consider a policy to put in place.
In an STR situation, perhaps that could be created.
Correct,
In
as
an
an
STR
interim measure, yes. Whereas, I'll follow up on what Mike was saying. Yes, it is possible perhaps that the planning board could make some revisions to the definition of single family, or make a determination based on some of the input the committee's looking for, that the payment of the rooms and meals tax therefore equals a commercial use, and then put it to the voters whether voters want commercial use in residential neighborhoods. My takeaways from the committee meetings, however, is that the problems aren't that it's being rented, it's loud people, too many cars in the yard, too many people on the docks, we don't like putting our boats down there. So those are all things that the selectmen can grab right a hold of. Can put parking rules on
Right.
town roads, can up the enforcement or accountability for claims of vandalism and things like that.
Right.
I kind of agree. The state needs to weigh in.
And commercial use, business, I think the state will ultimately decide all of that.
Correct. Okay, keep in mind, one of the reasons the legislature might be having trouble with this is a couple of years ago, they allowed every single family home to have a rental unit on it. Oh, we call it accessory dwelling units, but since they can't be sold and they have to be owner occupied, in one of the units, the state has now allowed every single family property to have a rental unit on it. And not surprisingly to some of us, a couple of years later, the STR thing hit the proverbial fan. So the state's trying to wrap its head around what they've already done, what that may have led to, and then how to put regulations in it. To that end, the DRA does not have any more spare time to be regulating all of these short-term rentals any more than the Wolfeboro Police Department does. So it's an interesting balance to achieve. So, my 2 cents.
Okay, Susan, thank you very much for bringing this up. I appreciate it. Okay.
I have one other comment, that the people on this committee are brave to walk into this quagmire.
Thank you.
The solutions aren't easy. Whichever way you go, you're going to make people unhappy or get sued. And so it's, you're brave.
Just to reassure
Appreciate the
you,
planning board's feedback.
you're not going to get sued personally.
No, not personally, but the town will get
The
sued.
town will get sued, sure.
Oh, okay, let's see, the next item on the agenda is the Wolfeboro view sheds. This is a pamphlet that Peter Goodwin had put together. Actually, Peter, when I was in town hall the other day, I was talking with Amy Muccio, and she and I then walked around town hall and thought of all sorts of places where she could put brochures, because this is the type of thing that they feel that people really would like to see. So And anyway, do you want to sort of take it from here?
I have 3 changes that probably should be made. Third paragraph at the bottom, and then avoid them rather than avoiding them would be appropriate. First paragraph after suggestions protecting the view shed, what 4 others see, delete the word for. And I would be happy to, in the number 1, preserve much of the vegetation, which talks about vegetation, and then it turns out it changes to, in the 5th line, realize that outside lighting can be seen at a great distance, and that in fact is dealt with later on. So I would delete that from realize to the end of pointing downward.
That is a new change.
Okay, any other changes that people wanted to see? Okay, so Peter, are you thinking of passing it out like this, or
Of doing what?
I mean, as far as the pass out is concerned, are you thinking of having it like this, or is it going to be?
I think that this is going to be something that people can see and people can pick up.
Okay.
And, you know, who does it and whether they follow any of the instructions or thoughts is up to them. It is not anything that we can, I don't think we can legislate. But education is, in fact, what we are supposed to be doing.
Right.
And this is an education piece. It has no weight in law.
I think it's well written, Peter. I love the message. It's important. I think that if it's something that you're just hoping people will pick up when they are building, then if you could title it something that jumps out at them a little more, like building a house.
Think about view sheds.
Please read. Please consider. Something a little more that grabs their eye a little more, because it's good information.
And that actually would be good to have something about Wolfeboro view sheds and building a house
Right.
as the title.
Okay, any other comments?
Well, yeah, this isn't for just when you build, though, is it? Isn't this for any renovation at any time?
It is, but this is at least a start, and I think that many of the people who are buying property, especially on ridge lines, or rebuilding or buying and tearing down a house and building their new house on the lakefront or a waterfront, are they're the ones we're really talking about. At the same time,
I'm just saying maybe instead of titling it just for just new homes, you could have a second stack of exactly the same thing with a different title. It says, oh, you're remodeling? Upgrading, you know? And maybe even a different color. And then, oh, I picked up a blue one today. Did you see this, honey? You know, and they read it again before they realize that they already read it, but now they've read it twice.
I mean, I think that also there can be pieces in the Granite State which end up talking about view sheds, and you know, this is more for the people who are building houses, but there are a number of houses around the lake where I am where there are lights that shine outward, and if people are aware and made aware through publicity, they may change. They may not.
Well, it would have been nice if the people right directly across the street from me had read some of this stuff before they cut down the pine trees last fall. Now I have all of their lights.
Yeah.
I know someone who has paddled across a bay and unscrewed light bulbs.
I've thought about that in the winter. Yes, I have.
What's his name, Peter?
Okay, go ahead, John.
So, nice job, Peter. I like the way that you rounded up the 1 through 6 items, and I just had a little writing for the heading instead of in this regard. There are a few things to think about. I like in this beautiful community we live in, there are a few neighborly things to think about, and just to let everybody know that that's what we are. But I think you hit it on very good.
Don't paint your house pink.
I'm glad you told me
But
that.
I like your addition to the title.
Oh, okay, so Tavis, can we get this into some sort of a final version? Absolutely. For Amy and her new pass out?
Yes, I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, okay, all right, that's great, thank you very much, Peter, and I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues in the master plan where education is really what it's all about, and as much as these things that we can get out to people, I think it'll be helpful, so thank you. Okay, let's see. Let's see, public comment. I don't see anybody out there
Because this is talking about views and this is...
dying to speak to us. So, okay, Tavis, do you want to kind of fill us in on what's happening with the ZBA and our recent denial, I guess, of a project?
Well, without going into too many details, ZBA next meeting is going to have a very full agenda. One of the items on there is Eastern Propane's appeal of the planning board motion to determine an application not complete as the use was not permitted in the zone. So that will be discussed. I am awaiting a call back from Planning Board's legal counsel, essentially to find out who should represent who in the instance when you have the same attorney that represents the zoning board, also representing the planning board. And then I'll provide that guidance probably straight to you, Kathy, and then let you determine if you want to have someone from the planning board there or not, or just let the zoning board rely upon the planning board minutes that led to that certain decision and then see where it goes from there. Keep in mind, the applicant has also applied for a variance, so if the appeal of the planning board decision finds in the favor of the planning board, then they are going to apply for a variance for the use that is not permitted, which was the suggestion of the planning board. So they've sort of covered all the bases on that project.
Okay. So no determination has been made whether we have to get a different attorney or...
No.
Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay. All right.
Regarding that issue, Madam
Yeah, yes.
Chairwoman,
Yeah.
just want to make sure that revisiting the permitted uses in the Pine Hill Road Development District is on our work schedule. Revisiting the uses on the C2 district is on our work schedule. It's clearly a problem. We just unfortunately discovered when they came here to apply for a use that was not permitted. We need to fix that so it doesn't happen again, and we can get it onto the ballot next March.
Right. Okay, so...
I just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, let's see, draft minutes from May 4th, 2021.
I have some additions.
Okay,
Paragraph 4, public meetings, CIP appointment, selectmen. After the sentence that starts Kathy Barnard stated, insert the following. The Planning Board voted unanimously to appoint Linda Murray as the Board of Selectmen's representative to the Capital Improvements Program Committee. Continuing on, Brad Harriman stated the BOS appointed Brian DeShays as alternate representative. Add an additional sentence. Mr. Hodder noted Mr. DeShays will be welcome to sit with the public and can address the CIP during public comment.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Motion and second? Second, anyone?
Seconded.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Okay, that's right. Very good. Okay, and other business.
I don't have anything.
You don't have anything?
I don't.
Okay. All right, then I guess.
Move to
we-
adjourn?
Seconded.
Thank you. And all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye.